Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on marketing SEL in your school or district. We are very excited to have you here. And we hope that we're going to be giving you a lot of information that's going to be helpful to you today for your work. My name is Amy Walker, and I'm here with Committee for Children. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships, and I have Dan Albaum is my co-presenter today. Dan, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Really looking forward to talking with you today about communicating and advocating for SEL within your districts.
Yeah, and Dan is our fabulous marketing director. He's full of all kinds of good ideas to share with us today. But before we begin, I wanted to just take a minute to tell you a little bit about Committee for Children. If you're not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social, emotional learning and development. And our programs are used all around the world, and we are very proud to say our programs are reaching over 20 million kids. I also want to begin with our equity statement, which is our commitment is to recognize, condemn, disrupt, and seek to rectify systemic injustices that create barriers to children's success. Our offices sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, past and present, specifically the first people of Seattle, Washington, the Duwamish tribe, which is where Dan and I are today. And we would love for you to take a minute to consider the first peoples of the land where you are today. So if you're not familiar with Committee for Children, we are most widely known by our Second Step family of programs, and we really offer a holistic approach to building supportive communities for every child through social emotional learning. Our Second Step family of programs supports the whole child by building social emotional competence, addressing bullying, and helping protect children in school with resources that also support adult educators and extend beyond the classroom. We're not going to be talking anymore about Second Step today, but you are welcome to come and visit us at our website or join us for a webinar on the Second Step program, and we would love for you to do that. So Dan and I actually did a pre-recording of ourselves talking about marketing SEL in your district. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you now, and then we're going to come back in just about 40 minutes together for a live Q&A session on some of the things that you are hearing here in the in our discussion. And while this is playing, you are welcome to chat with us in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we will also, like I said, be answering questions at the end. Well, we are very excited here today to have this conversation with you about marketing social emotional learning in your district. And I thought before we begin our conversation, I thought I'd just give you a little context for how this webinar came to be. And also Dan and I are gonna do a proper introduction so you can learn a little bit more about us. But the way this concept came to be for this webinar was actually because I had been at a conference and I had seen a marketing executive do a presentation on using marketing best practices in your school district. And from that, I thought, gosh, that was really, there was just a lot of information in there that I thought would be really useful to school districts in marketing all of the things that they do. And one of the things that we are constantly coaching our clients on at Committee for Children is how to market SEL in your district, how to get buy-in from teachers, from principals, how to engage families, how to talk to your school board, how to talk to your superintendent. We're always talking about getting buy-in and creating engagement around social emotional learning. And so when I saw that presentation at the conference, I thought, gosh, I bet I could tap Dan Albaum, who's our director of marketing at Committee for Children, to share some of those really great marketing tips that you can all use to tell your story about SEL. So before I formally introduce you to Dan, I'll share with you a little bit about who I am. As I said before, my name is Amy Walker, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Committee for Children. And I've been at Committee for Children for almost 20 years. And most of the time, in my time at Committee for Children, I have been working with school districts to help them implement our Second Step social emotional learning program, as well as talking to them about how to choose SEL programs, how to implement SEL programs. I've been doing trainings and all sorts of things around coaching SEL leaders on how to do Second Step and to do social emotional learning. And one of the things I've done in that role is probably half the conversations I've had are all about getting buy-in, because usually at Committee for Children, we're typically speaking to the choir. We're talking to the people who want SEL. So much of what I have done has really been about coaching our second step clients in terms of trying to create engagement and buy-in for doing social emotional learning, doing it well, doing it to fidelity, and really trying to embed it into their schools and districts. So I have quite a strong background in doing this as well, but Dan has a really, really in-depth and long experience as a marketing executive, and he is going to share with us today lots of information from the field of marketing that I think can help you to really promote SEL in your school districts. So do you want to say hello, Dan?
Hi, everyone. I've had more than 3 decades of experience as a professional marketer, but I've been at Committee for Children for just under 3 years. And my focus and the team's focus in marketing is all about helping build awareness and interest in second step social emotional learning programs, and more specifically, how we can support you and our clients in being able to fully transform the social emotional well-being, not only of students, but of staff. So I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. And obviously when it comes to marketing SEL, you have to, you're marketing it to kids, to parents, to principals, all sorts of people. So we're hoping today that Dan can give you some really great advice on how to do that. So I have a list of questions here I'm going to ask Dan, and then we're going to have some time at the end of our conversation for you to be asking your questions. And as we go along today, please be sure and type your questions into the chat box. And then after we've had our conversation, then we'll get to your questions and be able to answer some of those specifics. And we're also going to be talking at the end of our presentation about some resources that specifically you can use to do this. So we're going to be talking today with Dan about strategies. And then in the last segment of our presentation, we're going to be talking about actual resources that you can take to your principal meeting or to your in your family newsletter, or all the resources that we want to share with you. So here's a question I have for you, Dan. What advice do you have for a district leader who already has second step and feels like the level of engagement isn't very high? What could they do to get principals and teachers to prioritize second step with so many other competing initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy. And what I would recommend is really thinking about this opportunity for improved engagement and break it down into 3 different opportunities, 3 different concepts. The first is active listening. Second is around collaboration. And the third is around communication. So let me explain a little bit more about what I mean by each of those. So I talk about active listening. This is the seek to understand. That is, take the opportunity. You're in the midst of an important initiative to roll out social emotional learning, but it's important to first reach out to your key stakeholders in the district at the school level and seek to understand what are their current needs, what do they see as what's working well, what isn't working well when it comes to the overall well-being, right, of students and staff in terms of family engagement. You can do that in a number of different ways. Obviously, there are survey tools that you can collect that in a more structured way, but also there's opportunities for one-on-one conversations, to be able to ask those questions, build off of the relationships, get that back and forth communication going. Mini focus groups, right? Bring a couple of people together and maybe onto a virtual call, to really ask the questions and get the feedback. But this is all about seeking to understand, listening to the input that's coming in, and really establishing a foundation before you do anything else of having gone out and achieved that connection with those key stakeholders. Okay. So once you've done that, then there's an opportunity to really drive the active collaboration. And, there's been a lot of research on what builds healthy trust inside of organizations and in and around major initiatives. And one of the biggest drivers of that is being able to have cross-functional interaction, bringing people from different teams, maybe different disciplines, different job roles, bring them together with some shared accountability onto a common team. And so this opportunity I would describe as creating that core SEL working group, right? working group that can actually work together in optimizing that experience, right, of implementing the SEL program. So this means bringing those key identified representatives in different roles that you know are going to be critical at a district and at a school level, form a working group that really will define the goals for that implementation. And then even more importantly, once you start implementing, have a regular cadence of coming together to monitor the outcomes, the progress, what, if any, course correction along the way to achieve better results and better communication in and around that program. But the idea is you have this structured working group that has those different representatives.
You know, Dan, I have to say too, like having worked with so many school districts who've done this too, that's always been my recommendation as well. And I know, I mean, there's so many committees and oftentimes people are hesitant to make a new committee, you know, because they already have so many. But I really do think that if you want to do good quality systemic SEL, you really do need one. And it is because you need to engage all those stakeholders, because you just get so much better buy-in when you've done that. So yeah, I think that's super important. And also I do think that we should, and I don't want to, I know you have a couple other points, but I think after you finish that, I think we should circle back to also share some advice for the district who already, you know, has really implemented and didn't do that, how they can still go back and actually and pull together a group. Even if you're, you know, 3 years into your implementation, you still can do that. Anyway, but
yeah, well, that's a really interesting thing that you bring up, because it really isn't too late, and it's never too late. You may have implemented that, but actually that's the sign of really being very much in an active monitoring, you know, role, and having situational awareness to be able to go out and say, you know what, initiate those invitations. It may be post implementation, but it's not too late to identify those key stakeholders, bring them together into either a virtual conversation if it can't be in person, but have that established cadence of conversations, really talk about where the implementation's at, where are the gaps, what additional help might be needed. We'll talk a little bit later about how the partner program provider can help there maybe, but bring those people together at whatever point in time. It's never too late to do that. And the other thing that's really important about having that cross-functional group come together is it's a great way to drive the third concept, which is the communication, which is really to be transparent within the district, to all of your site leaders, to your educators, and then very importantly, and you mentioned this earlier, to families, right? To the parents and the families, to make sure that you've got an effective line of communication and transparency about the program and what their student is going to be experiencing as part of that program. So that's the third concept. And by focusing on each of the three areas I talked about, you've got a strong foundation to be successful with the implementation.
You know, one thing that comes up for me, Dan, as you're saying that is, you know, it's like, obviously you want to, for that group or that committee to be sharing out information with different stakeholders, whether that's families or principals or teachers. And I just kind of wonder what's your feeling from a marketing perspective in terms of how much information is the right amount? You know, because obviously everybody doesn't want all the updates on every single thing, but they do need enough information to really understand. And what is your opinion on kind of where that line is between enough information, but not too much?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that research around communication and retention of information that people consume has shown that it's actually probably more important to think about how and when that information is received as opposed to just the depth of the information, you know, that you're sharing. I mean, both are important, but actually what the research has shown, Amy, is that on average, 3 times, so think about repetition, 3 different times, same message, on average is what it takes for people to fully realize, fully internalize information. So the message here is that actually a cadence and some repetition around communicating what's going on with this program to the same audience, that's okay. It doesn't become duplicative. It actually becomes valuable to reinforce and to think about doing that a couple of different times, and so that they can retain it and actually you achieve better alignment because you've got people retaining that information. So repetition. And then the second aspect, if you're really thinking about updates on where this program, this initiative is, think about using a variety of different approaches to that. Don't use just relying on a single channel. All of us have inboxes in our emails that are just exploding, right? With traditional emails, right? We've got a lot in there. Stuff can get lost. Email has a place, but also use other things. If you've got established newsletters, right, specifically branded, in and around district communication, make sure to use that. Definitely pursue being able to incorporate some sort of mixed media into your message. So rather than just a straightforward newsletter, email communication, incorporate video, consider how that can work. Utilize online meetings, right? Maybe you've got a periodic forum that people are coming together to do that.
Dan, I actually thought, sorry.
Use all of them. Yeah, that's an opportunity. Yeah.
One thing that I know that you and your department have done so well at Committee for Children is you have created some really great success stories. That are kind of stories where you go in and you film a school or a district doing some really great work with Second Step. And I just wonder if that could be something that a school district could do as well. I mean, a school district could sort of have a success story about one of the schools in their district that's doing SEL really well. That seems like an approach to do. And I wonder if a district wanted to sort of feature one of their schools like in their newsletter or something, if you have any advice for what they might think about in creating a success story.
Yeah, that's a great point because, having worked in the marketing world for a long time, something that marketers really know and really believe is that one of the most powerful and most credible things that you can do as a marketer in terms of content is to actually share the success, right, of customers and clients. Share it through video, share it through written testimonial. It's a quote, or it could be a more elaborate, interview where someone tells a broader story in terms of what really drove that success. So I would really encourage all of our districts out there, that are implementing the SEL programs, where you've got some actual successes, or you can point to other districts that have proven successes and really powerful outcomes. Share that in your communication, right? That is relevant and it's credible. And again, just the experience of marketing and communication is that creates what we call an emotional connection, because you're sharing real world experiences, districts that maybe share some of the same objectives, challenges, problems, aspirations that yours has. And so it's definitely appropriate. And people tend to relate to other stories, other words coming from people that are going through similar experiences as them. So it's really powerful, Amy, to utilize that.
Yeah, I was thinking so. I know we use it all the time. So do you want your next question, Dan, or are you still answering that other one?
Keep them coming.
Oh, okay, great. So one of the main obstacles to engagement is something that I refer to as initiative overload. And that's where people actually want to do an SEL program. There's sort of a general feeling in your district that people they think that SEL is valuable. They sort of want to do it, but they have so much going on that it's difficult because, when everything's important, nothing's important, right? So if we have listeners out there who are at a school district where there's a general feeling that they get why to do SEL and they sort of, they sort of want to do it, but it's just mixed in among 100 other priorities. Do you have any advice for that person in terms of just raising SEL up with all the other priorities that are competing?
Yeah, one thing that I would recommend is, yes, you're competing with all of this noise. There's a lot of competition to get people's attention, hearts and minds, is to really make this more manageable. Break that initiative down into a set of manageable milestones and steps. And then what you're conveying then is this continuous progress, right? So you're laying it out, hey, we've got a series of steps we're going to communicate within this phase of the project. And that just helps people compartmentalize a bit more what you're communicating, as opposed to just being out there with a bunch of messages that can be a bit more overwhelming. So break it down into this cadence that's really geared around these natural phases, right? Early, mid, more mature phases of the implementation. And it's also really important from an authenticity, from a buy-in standpoint, make it real. Really try to stay away from hyperbole, avoid positioning these overly audacious, big, complex chunks of information. So speaking plainly and concisely in the context of a given phase, you broke it down to different phases with distinct goals, right, and milestones. People will really respect that. It'll be easier for them to digest, and you'll maintain this perception of continuous momentum because you're moving from stage or phase to phase to phase. So that's the way I would recommend to kind of think about the approach to communications on something that really is going to have a fairly long shelf life, right? Because these implementations aren't just a matter of days. You actually, want to allow time to really plant the seed and be able to get the full realization of the benefits of the program.
Yeah. One of the pieces of advice that I've always been giving to people when I work with someone at a district office, I'm always trying to advocate for however you can get, 5 or 10 minutes on a principal's calendar. Like I've always said, that's your goal. You really want to try to get 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, of course, you'd love to have an hour, but probably you're not going to get that very easily. But if you could get 5 or 10 minutes on a principal's calendar, or if just say you're a school counselor and you're really trying to promote it to your teachers, I always say, can you get 10 minutes on a staff meeting calendar? And I think that when you have just like 10 minutes to talk, and maybe you can only do that a few times a year or something. What would your advice be to someone who, like I said, a district office person who has got 10 minutes at a principal's meeting, or someone in a school that's got 10 minutes at a staff meeting, and they want to try to energize around SEL? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I think with a really limited amount of time, Amy, it's even more important. Focus on what the goal and the outcome is. Like, what's that future state that when everything is said and done, what is it that's going to look like? Focus on what that vision is. Don't jump in and start talking about all of the details and the steps, right, involved in the process, because you've got 10 minutes. If you want to get support, if you want to get alignment around really what should be that bigger picture vision of why are we doing this? Why would you even be asking for that support? Start there. Start with what that future state is. And that's where you can rely on some of the actual experiences of other districts and other schools that are out there in the way of success stories, testimonials, what's already been documented out there to kind of help make a case for what that future vision is. Again, I would, in this case, rely on more of the proven proof points, right, of the experiences of others, any data that supports that. But in 10 minutes, it's really, this is where we're trying to go. Here's what's available to us. Here's our recommendation in terms of a great SEL program for students and maybe for staff as well that will enable us to get there. And oh, by the way, for you as a principal, here are some amazing tools that are already available that our program provider has offered that is going to make this journey easier for you, because that's really important for us to think about as a site leader, as a principal.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been, that I always suggest is that you have to talk to the head and the heart. I always say, you need to kind of pull the heartstrings because that's our why. And then you have to show research to show how second step or doing SEL in general is going to make a difference in our schools. And so, one of the things I'm always saying is definitely, you always want to talk about the research around SEL and academic outcomes. You can find that on our website, or CASEL, of course, has that, or other organizations. And then I like the idea of kind of showing videos, because I think videos, and we have a bunch on our website. Certainly, you can find lots on our YouTube page, and also CASEL and other organizations. But I guess I'm always kind of offering that advice of, talk to the head and talk to the heart. Do you have anything to expand on that in terms of how much emphasis one should put on inspiration compared to how much emphasis on, the sort of research findings?
Yeah, emotional connection, I mentioned this earlier, is incredibly important. I mean, you just simply aren't going to achieve the goal of really truly rallying and getting the support you need on something like this, just trying to rely on a very informational, data-only approach. And, we've talked a couple of times about video as a way to help convey that message. It's really interesting, even in email communication. Do you know that including the word video in a subject line on an email, research has shown you get a 20% higher open rate just by including the word video. It shows that inclination that people are naturally curious and are intrigued by the idea that there is some sort of a different kind of a content piece than just another standard email. So even on those internal emails, if you've got some sort of video content, maybe it's that success story that we were talking about earlier, be really proactive about describing that in your subject line if you want that, if you need to have that communication opened by others, within the district. So I thought I would share that. And, bring in the whole marketing point of view in on that. I know surveys of marketers around the world that say, hey, which kind of content gives you the highest return on investment consistently? And well over half of them really point to video. So again, I really want to stress that. There's a lot of great video content available around SEL programs and their success, real world results. So don't hesitate to be very proactive and intentional in incorporating that into that communication.
Nice. And I'm going to be sharing with you in the last segment, when I share resources, I have a number of videos that you can use to get buy-in for SEL. So that's interesting, Dan. So the word video, even the subject line matters. And that also kind of just has me wonder in general, are there other just sort of best practices in terms of, like if you were going to send out an email to your principals or to your teachers, maybe how long the email should be, what time, is there a time of day or a certain day of the week that seems to be, better for sending those communications out? And also, I think our audience too might like any advice that you have on communicating with communities and families via social media, because I know that many districts are doing a lot more of that, and they're sort of learning how to do it well. And I'm guessing that you perhaps have some advice on the matter.
Yeah, sure. Well, to start answering several of those different questions that you packed in there, Amy, in terms of when to send a communication, for marketers that are doing broader marketing, whether it's to businesses or it could just be to a consumer market, one thing that has generally been true is that better results tend to happen if you think about the Tuesday through Thursday timeframe. Mondays are not particularly best. Fridays are definitely not particularly best. I don't need to say anything about the weekend, but really in that Tuesday through Thursday timeframe, really in the front end of day. And of course, may have some time zone differences as a marketer, but if you're talking within district, everybody's in the same time zone. So somewhere in that 8 a.m., 9 a.m. range actually has proven to be a pretty good time to be able to send those kind of communications. So that would be that. And then if we're talking about engaging families and we're thinking about different channels, like how do we communicate at these different milestones, of the SEL program? Here's the reality. The reality is that parents in your communities that have kids going to the school, yes, they are on these social media channels. And in fact, some recent research, of parents that have internet access, 75%. I said 75% of those parents are active on Facebook. And then about another 25% are active on Instagram or Twitter. So the reality, as you think about these different channels, those social media channels, the fact is a good chunk of your parents and your community, they're going to be out there and active. And so it's an opportunity for you to engage in a different way that really complements, it doesn't compete, it complements kind of your core communication that may be coming out through a newsletter or your organized school events for parents. And just think about a well-rounded approach to your communication, including the social media channels.
Yeah, it's interesting that I've often recommended to our second step clients that when they are implementing second step, that they should talk to their public relations department as well, because I feel like that, school districts' PR departments are so often just trying to defend, accusations, and sort of they deal with a lot of like negative stuff. And I always thought it would be a good idea to have your PR department kind of do some public relations just around, SEL, because it's a really positive thing. And, bullying prevention and all these things are really positive things. So if you're implementing, I think also it wouldn't hurt to ping your, PR person, and they might also be able to come and film a classroom or something. And also I imagine there's opportunities sometimes, especially in smaller communities, where your local media might be, you might get 5 or 10 minutes on a news channel too, I would think.
Absolutely. And actually, if you've got that internal communications group focused on the PR and the outreach to the local media, again, back to the importance of creating this SEL working group, that could be, again, another team that is represented on that core group. So you're giving them direct visibility to more of the specifics as you're implementing the program. So that's a really great call out.
One question I have for you, Dan, as well, is that I think, and there's some, I don't know, some families or some communities can have some concerns about SEL, usually because they don't really understand what it is. I'm just wondering if perhaps you have any advice for someone who kind of just wants to get out ahead of that and, just really educate communities on what SEL is, just to try to sort of mitigate any misunderstandings that you're teaching kids something, that is different than SEL. Do you have advice for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing is just to remember, you don't need to take this all on by yourself. That think about your program providers and make sure to take full advantage of everything that they offer to support you. So just I'll throw out an example from a second step perspective. We recently launched a webpage on our secondstep.org website that is specifically aimed at families, and being able to just very transparently share more information about the Second Step program, about social emotional learning, what it is, and really create more of an awareness and kind of a common understanding with families that can really hopefully complement the great communication that's happening from the district, from the school, from the teachers out to those families as well. But definitely, those are additional resources that are also provided there for families to go check out more. Make sure that you incorporate that into your communications, leverage the support that your program providers are offering you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Another thing, Dan, we have home links that are part of Second Step that can go home every week that inform families of what their child is doing in their Second Step lesson, and also has a very short activity that they could do, just a conversation piece with their kids. And I have also found over the years that many school districts do not use the family home component of their Second Step program to the fullest. And I'm sure that's the case with other programs as well. So whether you're using Second Step or another program, probably the home communication piece is a lot more robust than what your teachers are using. And in fact, also too, just to make sure that you're also sharing out the multiple languages, because I know with Second Step, we have more recently translated our home communications into something like 10 different languages. And anyway, no matter what program you're using, at least they would have English and I imagine Spanish. So use those. I think that in addition to educating your communities in terms of what you're doing for SEL, but also by just involving them in the program by doing the home links or doing the part that goes with your program, that alone is a really positive engagement around what you're doing for your SEL program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let me just look at my questions here. I think we've been talking about some really interesting topics, Dan, and I think that kind of covers some of my main subjects, but certainly, is there anything else that comes up for you in this conversation that you wanted to share with our audience about just how to use marketing best practices to promote social emotional learning in your district?
Yeah, just a reminder, when you're thinking about this SEL initiative and you're trying to communicate, you want to get alignment, you want to get support, both internal, and you want to create positive engagement with families. Make sure to think about that concept of active listening, the collaboration, and then the communication. So build your plan, structured around those three concepts. Repeat again, don't be afraid of that repetition, because that's critical to reinforce and get better retention from the audience. So be able to go in with a plan for being repetitive.
And now, Dan, wait, can I just pause there? When you say repetitive, are you talking about sending the same message 3 times? Are you talking about sending a similar kind of concept? Like, is it more effective to say, to send through the same thing, or is it just something that's slightly different but reinforces the same concept?
Yeah, it's the idea is the same concept. It doesn't literally need to be word for word, the exact message, but the idea is with the same general message, but do that a couple of different times. And this is where you can use those different channels that we talked about, or different vehicles for doing that. But just have a cadence, space those out. So it's literally not 3 messages within one day, but be able to space those out, over the span of a couple of weeks, maybe, to just, when you're in that initial phase of the project, to basically just remind and kind of reinvigorate everybody around this, using some different, again, phrases, or maybe bring some different content. If you've got a video, put that into one of the communications. You don't have to have it in all of them, but just, use some variety, but essentially have repetition around the core of your message. So don't be afraid of that. Also, really important, this is not just about information sharing. This is about having information that supports storytelling, because storytelling is what creates the emotional connection that we talked about that's so important. If you want someone to really believe in something, get them to actively do something in terms of supporting, if it means participating on a team, or participating and helping amplify the communication, you're going to have a much better chance to get them totally bought in if you actually pull them into a very interesting story, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of just data points, research data points, information. So it's crafting a story, which means having a very clear sense of what the vision is, what that desired outcome is. That can be an important part of crafting that story that will do a better job of really creating that emotional connection with your audience.
Yeah. A couple of things that come up for me too. Like I said, I've, been coaching people on SEL engagement for years. And one of the things that I always tell people too is, I always kind of say to go with the goers, in the sense of like that you're always in any given school or district, you're going to have a certain number of people who they just love SEL. Like they're into it. You don't have to sell them on it. You don't have to convince them. They'll do it even if it's not required. They're happy to have the kit. They want to be on the committee, and if you just really engage those people, you can create a lot of ambassadors with those people. And then the rest of the kind of, the swing voters kind of come along. If you have enough of those people that really are engaged, and I know that you had talked about, success stories and things. And I think that that's it. Like, I think if you're the SEL, coordinator at a district office, I mean, sure, you could go speak to the principals meeting, but probably the best way is to have one of those principals in your district who's doing a great job, have them speak at the principals meeting, and if you have, for example, in an elementary school, like if you have some of your teachers that are really into it, have them also help you to engage other teachers and, and to play a leadership role, because if you can get a lot of sort of SEL ambassadors out there. And in the same with families, if you can try to engage your PTA or engage other people. And one of the things that I have found too is that, excuse me, because SEL is often so well thought of among families, is that if you really use all of your family communication tools within your programs, what you do is you create an expectation in the family community that it's going to be done. And then that actually puts some accountability back on the school that it will be done. Because if the parents and the community wants you to be teaching SEL, and you're sending home these family information saying, we're doing second step, well, then your families are going to hold, the school accountable to actually be doing that. So I think that that's important. And the other thing is also kind of to come back to the accountability thing is, I think in addition to really doing all this great work around marketing and buy-in and engagement, I also think whatever you can do to have SEL or, whether that's second step or another program become something that's actually required is really going to make a big difference in your outcome. Because as much as you can bang your drums and be excited and try to get enthusiasm, ultimately, whatever is optional doesn't tend to get done very well. So, to try to use some of that engagement to actually create something that is going to be also required. And then even though it's required, you're still going to need to go and get people to want to do it, to really, pull at the heart and pull at the why. But I think that combination of having energy, engagement, enthusiasm, and also, some accountability and a requirement to actually do it. I think that those two things, you need both. So.
Yeah, it is focusing sufficient amount of time on the why, not just the what. So I totally agree with you on that. And then the other thing, as this program gets implemented and you've formed your cross-functional team, you've got your communication plan down, make sure to take those opportunities, those moments of recognition and gratitude. So as the folks come in, where you can weave that too at the right point of that journey together to say, you know what, we couldn't have been here without these folks stepping up and supporting us. So that's more of an internal communication, but it lets those people know that you've successfully connected with. We all know the power of recognition and gratitude expressed to that. So make sure to weave that in too.
Nice. Nice. Well, I hope you found this conversation useful. And now Dan and I are going to share with you just some of the resources that we have gathered up that we think might be useful in your promoting social emotional learning in your school district. Yeah, so I hope you found that informative. I certainly really enjoy listening to Dan talk. You know, as we said before, Dan has many, many years of experience in marketing, and I think one of the things he knows how to do well is promote SEL. So thank you for sharing that, Dan. And certainly, if any of you have questions in the chat box or other things that you want to share with our audience in terms of things that you do to engage with SEL, please type those in. So these are just some of the resources that I recommend. And like I said, the PowerPoint has links, the one you'll be receiving, but I think CASEL is a for sure go-to. I mean, the CASEL website has so much information for every level of engagement that you're looking to do. Certainly on our secondstep.org website, we have a ton on there. And also, you know, we have a ton on there for engagement, and also even, you know, within the program, that's where you're going to find the family communications and things like that. So the social emotional learning overview, what that is a webinar from CASEL. So that's a good one. The Second Step YouTube page, you know, Dan talked specifically about video and how important video is to, it's just such an opportunity. And we've already made tons of videos, so use our videos. And CASEL has videos too. I think, you know, there's a lot of great videos out there. And if you can make some of your own, even better. But also Second Step YouTube page has a lot of great videos. I think the SEL 101 webinar from CASEL, it's a recorded webinar. It's about an hour to watch, but it kind of just really gives a high level overview of what SEL is. So you could share that with principals if you have a committee that's coming together and you want to kind of level set to make sure that everybody in your committee is on the same page as far as, you know, what are we talking about with SEL? I think that's a great resource. You know, one of the things I've recommended often over the years is just a second step scope and sequence. I think, you know, sometimes it really helps to see the list of specific skills that the kids are going to be learning in second step. I think that that's a really helpful way of just sharing, you know, what is second step. Because if you're a principal or if you're a parent, if you're anyone that works with kids and you look at the list of skills that your kids would be getting in second step, you're going to say, great, I wish all our kids had those skills. You know, there's no skills on that list that you wouldn't be just super, super thankful to have for your child or your students. So I think that we have a Second Step Success Stories webpage that has a lot of different success stories, and you could pick one that maybe matches to kind of some of the goals that you're looking to meet in your district. We have also some great videos on there. And also, if you are thinking about making an SEL success story video from one of your schools, you could look at what we've done, you know, to get ideas. So one of the things we talked about a few different times in our conversation was about engaging families. And we have a family resource webpage at Committee for Children that we made. It's on secondstep.org. It's fairly new. So if you haven't heard of this yet, that's perhaps why. It's but there's a lot of information on there that can help you, that you can share with families directly, that they can, you know, learn more about SEL and about Second Step. I also kind of wanted to elaborate a little bit more on just some additional resources for engaging families that I like. I know that this is an important thing to be doing right now. And it's also a great opportunity to make your program even better, because engaging families with SEL is kind of a really way to take your program and up it up a notch. So here are some of the things that I like. Videos about SEL, and Castle has some, Edutopia, PBS. We also have some at Committee for Children. And also one of the things that I'm going to be doing later in the spring, probably in May, I'm going to be doing a webinar on engaging families with Second Step and SEL. So stay tuned for that, because I'm going to do a whole webinar on how to do that. But also, I think Castle has a parent and caregiver guide in both English and Spanish. NBC News has parenting guides for SEL. Panorama Education, if you're familiar with them, they have a family school relationship survey that you could use for families, just to kind of get a pulse on how how they're feeling about the relationship with the school and climate and things like that. Sesame Street has some great resources. The Harvard Graduate School of Education wrote an article on how to engage families with SEL. At Committee for Children, we have some additional resources ourselves. Parent Teen Connect is a website that we have that is for parents of teenagers. Captain Compassion is an annual comic book comic strips that come out with some activities to support that can be shared with home. We have a very famous nowadays Imagine Neighborhood podcast, which has hundreds of thousands of views, or people listening to those, and thousands of subscribers. So it's been a huge hit, and it's a podcast with great SEL content that you can use in classrooms, or also recommending to families. Mind Yeti, we have some mindfulness sessions that are available on YouTube and other channels. And also we did a Engaging Families with SEL webinar. So like I said, all of these are links, and in the PowerPoint presentation we're going to be sending you, will have those. Also, you can call us. Secondstep.org has a ton of information on Second Step, SEL, and you can use that to promote SEL in your district. And we're also happy to offer, individual consultations. So if you work at a school district and you either have kind of a Second Step program you feel like is not as strong as it might be, or you don't have an SEL program and you want to have one, we're happy to kind of offer you individual consultations. So those are just some of the resources that we have, and we have about 10 minutes left here. And so if you have any chat questions, you are welcome to be answering those. I don't see a lot today, so I'm hoping that is a compliment to Dan, and the fact that he's just shared a lot of information that that you were wanting. But if we do have a few minutes, I would love to just kind of open it up for Dan to kind of just sort of maybe perhaps even listening to some of the things you shared before brought up some new ideas for you.
I think one of the things I really want to encourage everyone out there, and we talked in terms of your approach to really being able to advocate and implement effectively the SEL program. A big part of it was active listening, and that's something that we strive to do all the time. And so we really value your feedback. So we talked a lot, we covered a lot of ground today. And as you think about that and you think about your experience, there may be new ideas or questions, but feedback, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you and engage in an interactive conversation about it, because we are constantly striving to better support you and support all of those important SEL advocates out there. So we can't do that if we don't have that continuous communication. So I really encourage you. We'd love to hear from you. Please keep that feedback coming in.
Yeah, and if you have additional resources that you use to engage SEL in your district, please share those links in the chat box too. Or certainly you can email us when you get the follow-up email. You can respond, because we're always looking for new resources that we can share with our amazing Second Step clients to help them get the word out about SEL. And one of the things that I thought kind of in closing here that comes up for me is that I've been at Committee for Children for nearly 20 years, and I have worked with so many schools and districts to implement Second Step in their districts. And I think One of the things that I think I've seen time and time again over so many people I've talked to is where they kind of feel like they're just this sort of one small person in a district, and they don't really feel like necessarily that they're in the position and they need this or they need that or they need principal buy-in or they need they need these things that they're not getting in order to have the successful program that they wish they had. And I just want to say, if that's you, if you feel that way, I'll just say to you that there are so many programs I've seen that started out with that exact person. So, I mean, I have seen huge district-wide implementations come because one counselor in one school was really passionate about it and really wanted to do it. And so you just plant seeds, and you can't always go to 0 to 60 in one school year, but the more seeds you plant, it does really grow. I mean, the thing is SEL is amazing. It works. It makes such a difference for your kids and your schools, and it can be pretty contagious. And so, the more that you promote it and the more you kind of, like I said in my earlier discussion, of kind of going with the goers and building out, those other ambassadors. And I really do just want to encourage you that all the seeds that you plant, they do make a difference. They do add up. And in fact, that really is the majority of really great school-wide or district-wide implementations came from someone who just did that. So, no matter what your role is in your school or district, really go and promote, because it all adds up. It all makes a difference. So, that's kind of my closing inspiration is just, no seed is too small. Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. And I'll see if Dan, do you have any closing thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, one thing that I would just, in listening to the conversation or the wrap up here, I think we all can relate, especially in the challenging times that we've got going on now, the idea of being part of community and being able to share and engage with others. So I really also want to encourage folks, there's some great communities that are out there that are great forums to be able to share with people in similar roles that are facing similar challenging issues. There's an SEL in education community out on Facebook. There's also a Second Step community out on Facebook. If you're not already part of that, go check them out, engage in the conversation, and I think you'll find that is another great resource for you as you think about how you really create the best results going forward.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Dan. And also too, if you want to follow us on Twitter and say what we do in social media and that too, you can probably get some ideas, from our Second Step Facebook book group and our e-newsletters and just some of the ways that we promote. And also I have to give a plug too, because it's the 2nd of March. March 11th is SEL Day. So what better day to be promoting SEL than on SEL Day? So if you can Google that, SEL Day, and you'll come to the website, and there's resources there to use that as kind of a launch pad for doing things in your district. But I think it would be fun to have something in your school or district to celebrate SEL Day. We're doing a lot at Committee for Children, and one of the things I'm doing in particular is I'm going to be hosting a webinar with Atlanta School District on taking your SEL program from good to great, which is another webinar we're going to be doing, which is going to have all kinds of ideas for people out there who kind of feel like they have an SEL program, but maybe it could be better. It's going to have a ton of great information. And like I said, I'm co-presenting with Atlanta School District. So that's a district that has, they have big school district problems and challenges, and they really are doing a great job with SEL. So you could join us for that. And visit our website, contact our client support services, look out for our email, and thank you very much for joining us. And please, we hope to see you at another webinar again soon. So thank you. And thank you to Dan for all of your great advice. We appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.